The original PlayStation is home to many video game classics of our childhood: Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot, and Parappa the Rapper. However, there are many original PlayStation games that have yet to have their fair share in the limelight. Reddit user Kindly Patrick has created an Iceberg chart filled with plenty of obscure PS1 games, many of which you may have already heard of, and others that remain hidden in obscurity. So without further ado, here is the Obscure PS1 games Iceberg. LSD Dream Emulator. LSD Dream Emulator is a strange Japanese game released on October 22nd, 1998 by Asmic Ace Entertainment, based on a dream journal of a fellow Japanese man, Hiroko Nishikawa, with the music being composed by Osamu Sato. Unfortunately for PlayStation owners in North America, the game was never localized for players on this side of the globe. However, the game itself has built a cult following on YouTube thanks to creators like Mudahar from Some Ordinary Gamers and PewDiePie showcasing the game on their channels. However, for those anxious to play the game for themselves, a ROM of the game exists on the internet that can be downloaded and played with a PS1 emulator, or if you still own a PSP, you can jailbreak the device and import it on there and play it on the go as well, which was what I did in order to play the game myself way back when. As you may have guessed, the game is a dream simulator of sorts that has a set of fully explorable levels that are randomized according to the type of dream that is being emulated, and there is no correlation of the LSD drug. The levels that you play through are determined by an in-game dream chart that graphs the game's dream experience by 4 different categories: upper, downer, static, and dynamic. There are also multiple dream characters that can be seen while wandering around the many dreamscapes. The most famous would be the giant baby lurking in the hallways of the game's hotel area, and a dark shadowy figure that came to be known as the Gray Man amongst the community. He wears a dark gray trench coat and hat, and is first encountered in the game's Violence District, a dark city landscape with dark alleyways and inconspicuous lighting from the street lamps. Incredible Crisis. Known as Tandemo Crisis in Japan, Incredible Crisis is a game about, well, how do I say it? The game is basically one big fever dream, and it originated from the land of the rising sun, so you know it's going to be weird. The plot of the story consists of 4 working-class family members and their grandmother Hatsu and her birthday. Unfortunately for Hatsu, everyone forgot that today was her birthday, so now everyone must rush around and try to come up with last-minute birthday presents in an effort to make it early for Hatsu's birthday. The gameplay is very reminiscent to Nintendo's line of WarioWare games, with how wacky and straight-up absurd with some of how the minigames are played. Dance parties at the office, to an elevator rapidly falling down 50-plus story buildings, to a UFO showing its disinterest in a teddy bear by blasting it with its laser beams. But as I mentioned before, this game comes from the minds of the Japanese. So for their standards, it's just another day in the office. No one can stop Mr. Domino. This game is just one big domino effect. No, seriously, I'm not joking. The whole point of the game is to run around the arena and drop as many dominoes in a chain, and then run into them and set off a chain reaction. Oh, and as you can guess, Mr. Domino never stops running. Not even once. Never takes a breather, or a water break. Nothing. He just keeps running. That's it. I tried to make sense of the game, but the wiki was no help. But it did mention something about the game having 6 different levels and a couple side characters, which I did see during the gameplay that I watched. And from the video creator himself, he managed to explain some of the game's mechanics for us, so I didn't have to stress my brain trying to figure them out. And I quote, "No one can stop him." Actually, a lot of things can. The whole point, though, is that you can't stop him. He's always moving. Anyway, here's a weird game for you. It was released on the original PlayStation at a discounted price. I believe probably because it's so freaking short. But it's one of those games you're supposed to try and score a high score on, which I don't do here. I'm going through and showing a full domino chain on each level. Those R's I bump into, they reset everything. That's good to do if you make a mistake or something, but they can mess you up if you don't need them. You do want to use them if you want to keep resetting a level after making a minor domino chain so you can get more points and add up to a high score. Those little spots at the top, they're for every one of those buttons you hit with a domino that causes something goofy to happen and potentially continue a chain. Once you light up all those lights, the level is over. If you light them all up, or more, in one rally, you get a lot more points. And slow mode gives you nearly half the amount of points as fast. And I've got a lot more notes and things to say, but I think I'll save it for a video where I can actually score a lot. I will say that you do have a limited amount of stamina, and when it runs out, you turn back into a regular domino. That's what those health spots are for. Intelligent Cube. Known as the coolest name on the planet, Kurushi, in Europe at least, Intelligent Cube is that one game we all wanted, but we just didn't know we wanted it. Do you remember those death cubes from Mario 64? And how you had to either avoid them or take a risk of death and try to have them land on you when their hole was on the side that was about to squish you? Yeah, well, they actually made a game just like that. You're a little guy on a big map with even bigger cubes that you have to avoid before they crush you to death. I guess we can say you just have to be a little intelligent on your maneuvers. MDK. Murder, Death, Kill, or MDK for short, is an alien shooter from 1997 developed by Shiny Entertainment for Windows, developed by Shockwave for Mac OS, and the PlayStation port was made by none other than Neversoft, the developers for the best rhythm game series on the entire planet, Guitar Hero. As I mentioned previously, the game is one of those space shooters, kind of like Space Invaders, but more boots on the ground. Our main character, Kurt Hectic, Duke Nukem's fifth cousin who happens to be a janitor and wears an elongated plague doctor mask, must infiltrate a mine crawler, which is a massive city-sized vehicle, and fight through hordes of aliens known as Stream Riders, and make his way over to the man piloting the mine crawler, to then make his way back to his base of operations, a space station called the Jim Dandy. This plot is just as outrageous as Incredible Crisis, and that's saying something. Thrill Kill. Thrill Kill was supposed to be a fighting game developed by Paradox Studios, but it ended up being cancelled and therefore never released. If that development studio sounds familiar, that is because they also made the Crusader Kings series. I'm not too versed in Crusader Kings, but if I can say, I like to say it's a mix of Civilization and Tropico. So seeing how Thrill Kill is drastically different from a medieval Europe simulator, I'm kind of sad that we never get a chance to see how the game would have came out. However, we do know the plot line that would have taken place had the game been finished. Apparently the game was about 10 fighters that end up dying and being sent to hell to have a tournament fight hosted by Maruka, a goddess of death, also that the winner can be reincarnated and given another chance at life. Honestly, that story sounds badass. If there's anyone out there with the skills to make a game, hell, even an RPG Maker game, let this story inspire you to finish the dreams the minds at Paradox had envisioned. Heart of Darkness. This game here has a really cool cover. You gotta remember back then, when buying physical copies of games was your only avenue of playing them, one of the joys of buying games was just staring off at the front cover and the back cover art, and just imagining what the gameplay is like before you even buy it. The covers of games were like the thumbnails of YouTube videos. If that cover art didn't immediately suck you in, then you immediately thought it was a trash game. Well, this game here has a really cool cover. You got Odie and Jesse the Wizard stanced up with his Florb Deflabulator, ready to slay some fools. And then there's that mysterious shadow lurking in the background. The story begins with our protagonist Andy being taunted in class by his teacher for his fear of the dark. Then his teacher gives him the idea to stare directly into the solar eclipse, and in the process a dark shadow kidnaps Andy's dog Whiskey to a world known as Darkland. And then Andy literally creates a machine that can take him to this alternate world where he travels and triumphs these new lands in order to save his beloved dog. Nearly as good as I Am Legend. Jumping Flash. This is a game you can actually go buy and play for yourself today, right now. This game just so happened to be released on every current PlayStation console since 2006. In the game, you control a giant robotic jumping bunny. What other game can you control a jumping bunny? Hell, the only games I could think of with even a rabbit is Minecraft and Terraria. But let's be real, Terraria did it first. If you haven't noticed already, the game is in first person, and the rabbit you're in control of is named Robbit, and his ever-long quest to collect missing jet pods that were scattered throughout the world like Dragon Balls by his lifelong arch-nemesis Baron Aloha. If you ask me, the game looks like a polygonal puke fest, but I won't lie. Something about games with this style of graphics just gives me that nostalgic, creepy, but not creepy feeling. I can't describe it any better than that, you just really gotta experience it for yourself. But I guess that's why this game has earned its spot on this iceberg. Tiny Tank. Have you ever played Heavy Weapon on the Xbox 360 arcade? That game where you control side-scrolling tanks and you gotta decimate all that dare oppose you? And sometimes you get nukes that you can use to wipe out every enemy off the screen? Well, it turns out Heavy Weapon actually embodies everything Tiny Weapon once stood for, plus nukes. But instead of being a side-scroller, Tiny Tank is a third-person shooter where you control Thomas Tank Engine's deranged German third cousin, Tiny, who's on a pretty damn journey for such a tiny tank. In Tiny's world, there was this corporation on Earth named Centrax, and Centrax wanted to use the machine they invented to fight humanity's wars for it. but they had to get the approval of the people. So what they did was create our man Tiny here. As a showcase of sorts, Centrax decided to create an event to show off the capabilities of Tiny. But that was when a turret that was actually loaded with live ammunition shot Tiny and shattered his AI consciousness, and it spread to the other robots and caused them to go sentient. And the one robot in particular, the one that happened to shoot the shot that deleted Tiny, establishes an identity known as Mutank. And he, along with the other robots, decided to eliminate humans so that machines can thrive. Eventually, after 100 years of being knocked out, Tiny is finally up and running after being repaired by these microscopic crabs that fix machines. And he vows to defeat Mutank and avenge his creators that thrived before him. Pretty freaking nuts. Vib Ribbon. There's not much going on when it comes to Vib Ribbon. However, I will try to give my best. There's not much going on when it comes to Vib Ribbon. However, I will try my best to give a detailed explanation. Vib Ribbon is an old rhythm game, not like Guitar Hero or Parappa the Rappa. It's actually more like Geometry Dash. Actually, just like Geometry Dash, in fact. You control a rabbit made of lines named Vibri, or Vibri. And you have to jump and avoid obstacles at the sound of the beats. And whenever you get hit by an obstacle, Vibri gets all scraggly until she becomes a mess of lines and falls apart, forcing you to start the level all over again. Pandemonium. A game following a jester named Fargus and a sorceress named Nikki that casted a spell on her town that ended up leaving it like Megaton. Now the pair must come together and journey to the Wishing Engine to undo the spell casted and bring back the village from destruction. RC Stuntcopter. Given that there wasn't much written on this game that I could find on the internet, the best I can do is give a brief description of what exactly the gameplay consists of. So the player is in control of an RC helicopter, if you couldn't tell by the name of the game, and it's basically like Rocket League, but instead of soccer, you're trying to land a toy helicopter and fly through the field goalposts in an attempt to get the highest score. There's also this very annoying narrator voice that tries to act funny, but is actually very irritating. Devil Dice. It's a puzzle game about baby devils running on a board game covered with dice. What more did you expect? Skull Monkeys. This game is actually a sequel to a game called The Neverhood. Both games were developed by The Neverhood Inc. and published by Electronic Arts. The story is centered around the main character, Clayman, who must defeat hordes of creatures called Skull Monkeys in order to defeat his old foe, Clog. Akuji the Heartless. Voodoo priest warrior Akuji is getting married, but on this same day, Akuji gets his heart ripped out of his chest, but due to voodoo magic, he is now cursed to wander the underworld and must find his way out. He eventually meets Baron Samedi and discovers that if he gathers the souls of his ancestors, he will be given another chance to walk the earth again. Takomo's Deception. A game like this would not fly by today's terms. You play as a Satanist that takes over ownership of a castle. You can also use the gold that you earn to edit your castle to add extra rooms and hallways, similar to the Link's Awakening map editor, and you can even place traps that will kill the unwanted guests that'll come visit you. Or you can capture them if you want to. Like this married couple that needs money for their ill daughter, so they came to you for help. But little did they know they would be captured and their souls offered to the demons of the underworld. Pepsi Man. We've all seen this guy before. This is literally the next biggest Fortnite skin if they ever decide to do something like this. I can already imagine this guy in the game. He already looks like he belongs there. Pepsi Man was a game published by Kid and released on March 4th, 1999. But this was one of those advertisement type games. For example, the Burger King guy games. Although they were actual good games, they were still advertisements for these companies. Basically, you run around as Pepsi Man collecting and drinking Pepsi, while the game tells you to drink more Pepsi. That's it. Told you it was an advertisement. Boombots. Another game developed by the Neverhood, Boombots was a robot fighting game that featured 10 playable robots, as well as a claymation animation cutscenes that are pretty creepy. I don't know. Something about claymation videos just gives off an unsettling feeling. However, the game did manage to get approval by Steven Spielberg and was able to get that DreamWorks Interactive logo slapped right on the front cover. The gameplay, however, doesn't quite hold up to the quality of everything else, though. Especially that character select screen. That thing looks gorgeous. But the gameplay is just... ugh. So sad. Boku no Natsu Yasumi. You ever played Animal Crossing or Harvest Moon back on the GameCube when you were a little kid? Well, this game is just like that, but for adults. Boku is a young boy that is sent on vacation to his aunt's house while his mother is in her final stages of giving birth. He passes the time while on vacation by exploring the area around his aunt's house, flying kites, and collecting bugs to square them up against each other with the other local boys he meets, all while spending time with his distant family. The game's creator, Kaz Ayabi, mentioned that his focus was on developing a game that simulates the real world of a childhood boy. And that he did. An immaculate job. Rogue Trip Vacation 2022. The developers of the game, SingleTrack, had worked with Sony, and they were contracted to release games only for the PlayStation. That was until SingleTrack was bought out by GT Interactive and released Rogue Trip as part of their new contract. They reused the game engine that they had used for the Twisted Metal series, and while the gameplay between the games was similar, the story had a few similarities as well. The game takes place in a post-apocalyptic scenario taking place in the year 2012 in a destroyed United States. There are a group of mercenaries that go by auto mercenaries, and they pick up tourists and hitchhikers and Uber them around to their destination, all while they fight enemy mercenaries using their vehicles and weapons picked up along the drive. Bad mojo. Have you ever wanted to play a game about cockroaches? Well, boy, do I have a game for you. Bad Mojo is a story about learning one's past and reconnecting family back together. Set in 1995 in an old bar owned by a man named Eddie Batito, he has a tenant that lives upstairs named Roger. Roger stole a $1 million loan he had gotten from a science corporation he works for, and he has plans to flee to Mexico City. After a dispute with Eddie, Roger is reminded of an old trinket his mother had given to him. And this trinket transforms Roger into a roach, and he is transported to a sewer that is connected to the rooms throughout the bar, and he's guided by his deceased mother on a journey through his past. After a series of events, Roger has to save Eddie from a gas leak, and upon doing so, it is revealed that Eddie is actually Roger's dad, and that his mother had been trying to get them to finally get a chance to connect with one another. Tobal 2, an old fighting game published by Squaresoft, and boasts the achievement of the biggest character roster in a fighting game, with a total exceeding 200 playable characters. Silhouette Mirage. The game is a 2D scroller with 7 levels and features a combat system based on 2 different attributes, Silhouette and Mirage. Certain enemies are only damaged depending on the attribute that they are, so Shaina, the game's main character, can change between these 2 attributes depending on the side of the screen she is facing. Shaina was created by a supercomputer named Jahina, with a goal to track down and repair Ito to unite the beings that were created due to the experiments that Ito had been performing, all in order to undo the chaos that had happened to the world. Power Shovel. Power Shovel is quite a unique game, really. You're in control of a power shovel, and you're the new guy on site, with a piece of heavy equipment and a crazy foreman. You do a great job, and you earn a lot of money and can go shopping. Do a bad job, and you'll hear it from the boss. Grid Runner. Grid Runner is a top-down tag game where players run around a maze-like grid that they can manipulate to an extent. You can compete against other players or the AI, and they even came up with a story mode for this game. If you want to play an intense capture the flag match in a game that isn't Halo Reach, then be sure to give Grid Runners a try. Rising Zan. Now here's another game I wish I would have had the chance to play when it first came out. This game is a mix between an old Clint Eastwood Western film and Japan's Edo time period. The game's main protagonist, Johnny, is a cowboy that was ambushed and nearly killed by an assassin. After recovering his almost lifeless body, Johnny is trained in the way of the samurai by his late father's friend and returns to town under the new name Zan, and vows to defeat the assassin that made the attempt on his life. He wields his revolver, Johnny No More, in his left hand and his katana Demon Slayer in his right. And many of them refer to the game as the spiritual predecessor to the Devil May Cry series. Due to the game's similar wacky humor and combat combo system, there is also a ranking system at the end of each level on the scale from weak to bitchin'. Machine Hunter. In a world where robots and humans coexist, a virus is created that turns the robots into human-murdering machines. And the hope of humanity's survival is up to one man to destroy the machines and put an end to this wicked virus. The game is a top-down perspective shooter with over-the-top violence, and in a world like ours, especially with this new AI deepfake trend, who knows, maybe one day this will be our fate. Little Big Adventure. Before we even get started, I should mention that this game in fact has no connection to Little Big Planet. Trust me, I got hyped thinking there was a previous game that had existed on the PlayStation, But alas, I had gotten my hopes up, so to save you from the same fate, I figured I'd get that out of the way first. However, if you bought the game in Europe or Japan, it went by Little Big Adventure. However, here in the States and the rest of the world, the game went by a name, Relentless Twin Suns Adventure. Which, it makes the game sound way cooler than it actually looks. The game takes place on a planet called Twin Sun, and the inhabitants of Twin Sun were all pushed to the southern hemisphere of the planet by an evil tyrant, Dr. Funfrock. And now it's up to Twin Sun to defeat Dr. Funfrock and free the people of Twin Sun. Crazy Ivan. Whoever made the cover art for this game was heavily inspired by the Terminator movies. So inspired, in fact, it didn't even attempt to make it any different from the movie's cover either. Crazy Ivan is a game about a Russian soldier named Ivan Popovich, who uses these military-grade mech suits to defend the Earth from a robotic alien threat. Finally, a game where the Russians aren't the bad guys and end up saving the world. They don't make them like that anymore. Life Force Tenka. Set on Earth in 2096, pollution and wars have turned the Earth from an ideal celestial body to a hellscape everyone is itching to escape. There is a planet just out of the solar system called Extravis 328 that is looking for new workers for their new corporate conglomerate that manufactures a new issue of Deadly Warriors called Bionoids. Your name is Joseph B. Tenka, a future Bionoid upset with the way things have been run, and you wish to bring an end to evil corporations' plans. Irritating Stick. Despite the name, Irritating Stick is just a video game version of Operation. But instead of trying to remove hazards from one's body, you're actually guiding a stick from one end of a maze to the other. And if you touch the sides of the wall, you'll irritate the stick and lose the level and have to start all over again. Mort the Chicken. In this universe, chickens are the dominant species on the planet, and Mort here stars in his very own television series. But when cube-like beings from an alternate universe called the Booleans are spying on them, and their leader, General Cubicles, makes the mistake that haystacks that the chickens have are actually citizens of their universe, and he decides to launch an offensive against Mort and his species, and kidnaps and scatters baby chickens all throughout the universe where Booleans come from. And Mort is the only chicken brave enough to enter an unknown world and save the chicks. Cooler World. Developed by a Swedish game studio called Game Design Sweden AB, Cooler World is a game where players take control of a Kula beach ball and must navigate through levels and collect jewels and keys to unlock the exit to progress to the next level. This game reminds me of that old marble game back on the Xbox Arcade. If you know, you know. Rat Attack. In a universe where a pair of lab rats sent to space become intelligent beings that rival the minds of humans, Washington and Jefferson, two rats, return to Earth and use their newly gained superintelligence to conquer the planet, amassing a massive army of rats with orders to destroy all that stand in their way. However, the cats on the planet get together and form a team known as Scratch Cats to combat the Rat Armada. Baroque. Set in a post-apocalyptic world after an experiment led by a being named Archangel to understand a being known as the Absolute God goes bad. It causes devastating events and climate change, and leaves any remaining humans that survive becoming twisted manifestations of guilt. Now it's up to the protagonist to work with Archangel and make their way through the Nero Tower to find the Absolute God and undo the disasters that change the world. Silver Lode. Taking place in 1879, a half-Native American bounty hunter under the name Gunslinger has his services hired by a traveling settler who had his son Ben kidnapped by raiders. Upon locating the raiders' trail and following behind it, the gunslinger ends up in a mysterious silver mining town named Silver Lode. The game originally released in Europe for PC, but the PlayStation version was given an international release. However, the ESRB rating system in the United States gave the game an M rating for mature due to the graphical content and profanity used in the game. Aquanaut's Holiday. You know what I love the most about games from the early 3D era, spanning from about 1998 to 2004? It's that they did a lot of experimenting with different types of games and gameplay styles. For example, you have the 3D platformers like Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, and Crash Bandicoot. Then you have shooters like Perfect Dark and GoldenEye. But you also have experimental type games. Well, what do I mean by experimental type games? Well, have you ever heard of a game that was called Seaman on Sega Dreamcast, where you take control of a hyper-intelligent fish with the head of a man and follow him through the evolutionary course while Spock from Star Trek narrates the story? Well, they happen to make plenty of other games similar to Seaman, like Aquanaut's Holiday. and the aspect of just playing the game, no convoluted story, no enemies shooting explosives at you and trying to kill you. It's just you, a massive ocean, and plenty of unique aquatic life for you to discover. And your only real goal in the game is to create a beautiful coral reef filled with sea creatures that call it home. Occasionally, you'll come across underwater ruins and treasure to uncover, but most of the time it's just you and the fish. Broken Helix. The year is 2026, which isn't that far away from the date of today's recording. And Jake Burton is an explosive expert, a part of the United States Marines working at Area 51. I should also add that he's voiced by the one and only Bruce Campbell, so if you're a big fan of the man, you might want to play this game. To keep a long story short, Jake's dad also worked at Area 51 as a scientist that performed top-secret experiments. When Jake was 9 years old, he was told that his father had died along with 10 other scientists in a plane crash, but no other information on such an event was provided. Down the line, Jake is contacted by a nameless man that tells him he once knew his father and had a decent relationship with the guy. Jake gets contracted by the military and gets sent out on a mission to defuse bombs, and the game takes a spiral when it comes to the story. At the time of the game's release, when Konami was developing the game, they marketed a key feature of the game they called 4D, and that was because all of the game's events unfold in real time. But this doesn't mean what you think it means. You see, unfolding in real time for gaming terms is basically, there's an endgame clock or a timer that ticks down as you're playing the game. While shooting your way through enemies, solving puzzles, and even cutscenes, the endgame clock keeps on ticking. Think of Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. There's a 3-day time cycle that you have to keep in track of before the world ends, but instead of time only going down when you're running around the world, in Broken Helix the clock is always going. There are also 4 different endings the player can achieve while playing, each of which is achieved through the different decisions the player makes early on in the story. Guardians Crusade. Known in Japan as Night and Baby, Guardians Crusade is a JRPG developed by a studio named Tamsoft. Although the game itself didn't receive much commercial success due to many claiming it to be a child's introduction to RPG games, it did, however, have a few notable features that were uncommon and quite impressive for JRPGs at the time, one of which was the seamless transitions between entering towns and the overworld, as well as a feature that we all wish was in the early Pokemon games, the ability to choose whether or not you wish to engage in combat when exploring instead of random encounters every 5 steps. Awesome. Forsaken. In the distant future, the advancement of science has exceeded humanity's ability to control it. During a subatomic experiment, an accident causes an uncontrollable fusion reaction, utterly destroying the surface of the planet Earth. 1 year later, Earth has been classified as condemned by the ruling imperial theocracy, meaning that it is now legal for anyone to salvage anything left on the planet. Mercenaries from all over come to raid the dead planet, forced to battle not only each other, but the robot sentinels that the government has left behind. Now, I should also note that the game's main objective differs depending on the console you're playing it on. On the Nintendo 64, your main objective is to defeat... On the N64, your main objective is to defeat all the looters trying to steal the great treasure. And on every other version of the game, you're actually trying to recover this lost treasure for yourself. They also remade this game back in 2018 for PC and Xbox One, so if you want to give the game a try for yourself, it shouldn't be too hard. Monster Seed. Monster Seed is a brand new type of monster collection RPG. The player has to gather monster eggs, incubate them, and then send their collection of different monsters to battle. The player controls Master Daniel, who is a ruler of monsters. With Daniel, you have to venture through a dungeon map, finding enemy rulers and monsters and clearing given tasks. By using separate memory cards, you can make these monsters fight against each other. With Monster Seed, you can enjoy the fun of creating your own ultra-powerful monsters. Project Overkill. The game takes on a 3D-esque isometric view in which the player chooses one of 4 mercenaries to lead through the levels. The characters act as lives, and if one were killed, the player still has a choice among the remaining mercenaries, rather than having multiple lives for one character. In the levels, the player must find key cards, destroy guards, kill aliens and robots, activate laser bridges to complete an objective. Objectives include finding the exit to the level, assassination of an officer, escorting a defect or other important NPC, retrieving an item, usually a memory chip or the like, or obtaining a certain percentage of kills in the area. The 4 characters have very different skills. For example, the large alien, Quag, has a melee attack that will kill the standard human troops in just one hit. Also, each character has slight variations in weaponry that make for somewhat different combat experiences depending on the character you're playing on. Sheep. The player gets to choose between 4 different sheep herders, and the goal is to escort sheep that are actually aliens from a planet named Ovis Ares that are disguised as sheep through a plethora of obstacles such as archers, knights, and demonic chefs, all while trying to reach the finish line and complete the level. Perfect weapon. An Earth Defense Force top agent and martial arts world champion named Blake Hunter is knocked out after winning a match and taken away to an alien environment. Now all alone, Blake explores his surroundings, fighting for his life and trying to find answers as to what happened. The Divide, Enemies Within. In The Divide, Enemies Within, the player takes control of an explorer of an alien planet. After they land to investigate, they are attacked where the player is frozen and their partner kidnapped. After being thawed, the player takes control of a mech and sets out to rescue their partner and destroy the alien menace. The basic gameplay has a player explore through 8 different worlds with a total of over 100 different stages in a 3D environment. The player explores the levels, collecting new weapons and power-ups to fight out the 20 different enemies scattered throughout the level, and at the end of each level, the player must fight off an enemy boss before fighting the final boss at the end of the game. Pinobi, Wings of Adventure. Grandpa Bee has been kidnapped before finishing you. Pinobi, a robotic bee made to defend the world. The player must go through 9 worlds in order to find and rescue your creator, Grandpa Bee. There are multiple storylines with multiple endings. Pinobi can take out most enemies by jumping on top of them, but the most important means of attack is a dash which can be executed in any direction. The amount of consecutive dashes can be upgraded when meeting a certain character. Pinobi collects flowers, and question mark bubbles provide power-ups, enhancing the dashes, providing temporary shields or other bonuses. Players can use the game link to collect and trade items with friends for power-ups. Tale of the Sun. When the game begins, the player is situated at the home village with no goals, objectives, or guidance. The protagonist is free from the outset to go nearly anywhere and do basically anything. The landscape the player inhabits is not only shared by a variety of polygonal fauna, but by flora rendered in the form of mochi of various shapes and colors, which have varying effects on one's health and various status. While exploring the landscape, the player's character will need to sleep and will often choose to do so while in the middle of running, hunting, or swimming. The North American release allows the player to wake the caveman up when this happens. The player's ultimate objective is to build a tower of mammoth tusks that reach the sun. To this end, a large map full of various creatures and oddities must be traversed in an effort to locate and gather sufficient food for the tribe to thrive and multiply. Dreams to reality. In this game, you play as a man named Duncan, and Duncan is on a quest to save the world of dreams and reality from a dark force. You must traverse floating aisles and defeat monsters and collect all the objects in order to advance to the next level. Excalibur 2555. Mysterious soldiers from the future have traveled back in time to steal Excalibur from King Arthur's court. The wizard Merlin sends a young female warrior, Beth, into the future to retrieve it. With her giant sword in hand, Beth travels through a gloomy underground city, helping out the local people whenever she can. Excalibur 2555 plays similarly to Tomb Raider, and that players roam fully through 3D environments, solve puzzles, and collect items which can be used and saved for later use. Johnny Bazooka Tone. The original Guitar Hero with the Elvis attitude and purple hair pompadour, Johnny Bazooka Tone has been imprisoned in the year 2050 in Sin Sin prison by El Diablo, the Lord of the Underworld, who is jealous of his talent and kidnaps other musical legends. In this 3D side-scrolling platformer, Johnny's guitar Anita has been taken from him, and he sets out to escape and vanquish foes on his way to be reunited with Anita. He can perform such moves as 360 spin jumps and hover jumps, among others, while using his bazooka guitar as a weapon. When powered up, it can emit a special sonic blast that fries anything within hearing range. As you make your way through the demonic levels such as Hotel Demonique, Hell's Kitchen, and Mr. Diablo's fiery penthouse, you can acquire more weapons, power-ups, and find secret passages that lead to bonus levels. The game's soundtrack includes the title track contributed by Bon Jovi guitarist Richie Sambora and Tico Torres. Monkey Hero. In this game, you play a monkey, a brave little monkey, who has been trained by another monkey called Master Sage. When the game begins, there are 3 worlds that are fighting against each other: the dream world, the nightmare world, and the waking world. The Nightmare King has stolen a book, the magic storybook, which is keeping the peace in the three worlds, and you have to get it back. Make your way through the waking world while fighting the Nightmare King's minions to get the book back. Travel through libraries, forests, and mines. Make friends which will help you on your quest. Use your weapons to crush crates, and these crates can contain fruit which will increase your health. If you don't have a weapon to crush the crates, then you have to throw them. You'll acquire 2 weapons throughout the game. A bamboo stick to hit your enemies and small rockets, or spears to shoot down enemies far away from you. Solve many puzzles, defeat bosses, and you get to explore a large world. Steel Harbinger. In the year 2069, North America is shaken by war. Canada and Mexico are combating the United States. Not long after the start of the war, alien pods rain down from space onto North America, sprouting metallic tentacles upon landing. The tentacles attack humans and animals, transforming them instantly into monstrous alien biomechanisms, bent on destroying any human life they encounter. Dr. Bowen, a scientist, studies one of these pods in an attempt to learn about the alien species. The pod breaks out of control and attacks his daughter, Miranda, but when Dr. Bowen severs the attacking tentacle, Miranda is already infected. Thus, she transforms into Steel Harbinger, a half-human, half-biomechanical alien, and humanity's last hope for survival. Miranda must battle her way through Kansas, Las Vegas, San Francisco, Houston, Cape Canaveral, Washington, the Antarctic, and an alien planetoid, and the moon in an effort to save the Earth. Tunenstein, Dare to Scare. Trapped inside Baroness Tunenstein's mansion, Furball with Panicky Pals Plucky Duck and Hampton J. Pig must avoid getting their brain swapped with Elmira's cuddly creation, and find the mansion's riches if they are able to. In this haunted hide-and-seek, the only chance of escape is to redirect the mansion's creepy power and stop Elmira. Silent Bomber. The government managed to create a genetically engineered man they call Judah Fate, who just so happens to be an expert when it comes to handling and using explosives. You can collect these things called E-chips that allow you to increase the capacity of bombs you can carry. Basically, the game is about blowing things up before you can get a chance to blow you up.
Tier 4. Swagman. Personally, when I hear Swagman, 2 things pop into my mind. Soulja Boy Tellum and Darnell from high school. And not a scary, shadowy figure with sharp teeth that lurks in the darkness. You play as a young boy named Nick, and Nick awakens to find himself in a strange dimension, after speaking to a figure calling itself the Scarab, and claiming to be the boss bug of Nick's collection, whatever the hell that means, and the veteran of all things dark and dank. The Scarab then explains that the dimension Nick finds himself in is known as the Realm of Night, and that things have been becoming more malicious since a being known as the Swagman has been lurking in the shadows, and spreading his evil influence all over the realm. Nick then speaks to a sister that has been shrunk and trapped in a bird cage. She informs Nick that she's scared and has no idea what's going on. Hell, I'd be confused too if I just woke up and I was a bird all of a sudden. That's when Nick concludes that the storybook they had read about, the terror of night known as Swagman, that preys on people while they're sleeping, this sounds awfully familiar to a very particular horror movie character. But this character, Swagman, traps people while they're asleep in their nightmares and causes his victims to never wake up. Now Nick must traverse the night and battle his way through green skeletons and voids that spit fireballs, all in an effort to free his sister and defeat the Swagman, to not only free themselves, but the countless other souls that fell victim to the horrors of Swagman. Eggs of Steel. Have you ever wanted to play a game where the main character is a humanoid Eggman on a quest to put an egg to a sentient steel factory that's trying to kill him? Well, boy oh boy, do I have the game just for you. Charlie Taconite accidentally spills his coffee on his workstation while reaching for a delicious donut, causing a malfunction in the systems and causing the machines throughout the factory to go haywire and channel their inner GLaDOS. Charlie must now traverse through 43 levels and defeat a total of 12 bosses to shut down this deadly sentient factory. And did I mention this game was put together by the creators of the Persona and Shin Megami Tensei series? Carnage Heart. You know what I love more than video games about super mecha death robots? A turn-based strategy game about super mecha death robots. And Carnage Hearts is just that. As the player, you play the role as the top commander in a war fought solely by robots called Overkill Engines, or OKEs for short. However, unlike other strategic military turn-based games, these robots are not directed during live combat, but rather they are pre-system. You can also buy new parts and equipment as well as research and upgrade parts for the OKEs that can be used to enhance the mech's battle performance. Other than that, the game doesn't have much going for itself. Shadow Tower. This game is the Dark Souls of PlayStation 1 games. Not just because it's a difficult game to play, but also because From Software did develop this game. Although unlike Dark Souls, you can actually pause the game and take bathroom breaks in between gameplay. The game takes place on a continent called Eclipse in the Holy Land of Zeptar, and you take on the role of a mercenary named Russ Hardy, or Roos Hardy. There's two U's, so it's one or the other, who was on his way back from a journey and came back to his homeland Zeptar, and he comes to the awful realization that the entire city has been sucked into another dimension known as the Underworld. He eventually crosses paths with an old man that bestows upon him the only sword powerful enough to defeat the demons responsible for the destruction of the city, called the Dark One's Sword. Pledging to save both the city of Zeptar and an old woman that raised him in his infancy, Roos, or Russ, descends into the underworld. Chaos Break. Set on an isolated island in an abandoned, contaminated biochemical laboratory called Fluxus Biomaterial Industries Lab Number 7, Rick and Mitsuki are agents of an organization known as DEF, and they're sent out to the lab to investigate the cause of an anomalous thermal reaction and retrieve data on both the reaction gone wrong and a missing DEF agent that was sent out 2 days prior to their arrival and lost communication with HQ. Upon reaching the research facility, Rick and Mitsuki are greeted by an overwhelming number of staff that have been mutated into parasitic alien life forms of their former selves. Soul Divide. An army of the Prince of Darkness, Satan, has been searching far and wide for a treasure known as the Seire Stones. He soon learns that one of the stones was hidden in the kingdom of Militia and was secretly entrusted in King Silverna's possession. Holy Knight Vorg was carrying out a mission in the forest town of Narafai when Satan's army invaded the kingdom of Militia. Hearing the news, Vorg immediately makes a return trip to Militia, only to find that the kingdom had been devastated upon his return. After a long and dreadful 7 years passes, Satan has made the castle of Silverna his new domain, as well as possessing a magical weapon known as the Soul Divide. A weapon that is one of 2 mythical weapons known as Helos. Vorg, now strong enough to take on the Prince of Darkness, as well as possessing the second half of the Helos pair, makes his way to the ruins of his beloved hometown on a quest to defeat the evil prince and avenge his fallen king and kingdom. Ball Breakers. After being falsely accused for a crime you didn't commit, you are sentenced to spend an eternity in an ultra-violent galactic prison and forced to partake in a futuristic gladiatorial sports game head-to-head against other convicts suffering the same fate as yourself. However, these convicts are the most violent and vicious prisoners the galaxy has to offer, fighting your way across the universe, beating any and all opponents with the hopes of winning back the freedom that was stolen from you. P.O.'d. You're a world-renowned chef that has perfected their craft. However, on an eventful trip of exploring the cosmos, you end up crash-landing on a strange and unfamiliar alien world where you must now use whatever tools as a means to survive. Equipped with a jetpack, drill, and the Left 4 Dead frying pan, you must traverse through 26 levels to uncover a way to escape this alien-ridden hellhole. Shadow Madness. Set in the fictional world of Ark Rose, a mysterious plague that is spreading quickly among the land has just wiped out a town that was once called home by a man named Stinger, who just so happens to be the game's main protagonist. Set out on a journey to find out the cause of this population-ending plague, Stinger comes across many allies as well as enemies while making his way to uncovering the start of the cataclysmic events that devastated his hometown and soon the world. The Unholy War. A race of cybernetic beings known as the Technos were fleeing from an alien race known as the Hunters that were hell-bent on eradicating the Technos from existence. In the midst of the Technos fleeing, they end up strategically crash-landing on a planet named Zara. This is because Zara has an unusual amount of radiation in its atmosphere that the Technos were hoping could mask their ships from the Hunters' radar scanners. While exploring the planet, they learned of an existence of a unique resource known as ore, and they decided that if they stayed on the planet and mined all the ore in Zara, they would become powerful enough to never have to worry about the hunters ever again. But this would pose as a serious problem for the original inhabitants of the planet known as the Arcanes. The Arcanes did not fancy the idea of outsiders invading their planet and robbing it of its resources, which is fairly understandable given the circumstances, and they band together to form an allied group, the Arcane Forces. After a deadly war spanning over 2 decades, a peace alliance was eventually formed between the two races. However, there was one rule that was specified to never be broken between the two peoples. No two people, one from each nation, can have a baby. But as the saying goes, rules are meant to be broken, and this rule would eventually attempt to be broken by Katrina and Andrus, that ran away into the wilderness with each other. However, they were captured before they could manage to conceive a child. However, their capture would lead to yet another deadly calamity, the Unholy War. 1. 1997. As a player, you take control of a man named John Kane, who awakens on the floor of an apartment building with none of his memories intact and one of his arms replaced by a Mega Man blaster. However, whatever you've done prior to waking up has caused every law enforcement agency to go on an all-out manhunt to bring about your end. Pursued across the city and countryside, your main objective is to uncover the memories of John, and your only clue to doing so is the barcode tattoo on the back of your neck. Attack of the Saucer Man. This game is essentially destroy all humans before destroy all humans could become destroy all humans. Ed, a peon of the Grimloid Intergalactic Empire, needs help to rid Earth of aliens. That's pretty much it. An alien killing aliens on a planet belonging to neither species of aliens. What exactly are all the humans doing while this goes on? Atlantis, The Lost Tales. The game begins with Seth, the protagonist, joining the Queen's companions, the personal guardians of the Queen of Atlantis. He discovers after he arrives that the Queen disappeared shortly before he joined. As the story progresses, Seth learns that a power struggle is taking place between the Queen and her consort Creon. Creon wishes to supplant Amu, the goddess of the moon, as the most worshipped of Atlantis' gods, replacing her with Sat, the sun god. He then wants to conquer the world in the name of Sat, using a new weapon he has developed. The weapon is revealed to be half of a crystal that is capable of granting immense knowledge to its holder. Long ago, the crystal was split into light and dark halves, and the halves were hidden in Easter Island and Stonehenge respectively. Creon found the dark crystal, which is a side effect of driving its holder mad. Seth retrieves the light crystal from Easter Island, then returns to Atlantis to face Creon. After Creon's defeat, the weapon he built causes a volcano on Atlantis to erupt. Seth and a few survivors are seen sailing away from Atlantis as it sinks into the sea. Fade to Black. Fade to Black is a sequel to a game called Flashback and continues the story following the events of the last game. The game's protagonist, Conrad Hart, Kevin Hart's fifth cousin, once removed, destroyed the planet of hostile aliens called the Morphs and went into suspended animation in a spaceship that floats aimlessly through outer space. In the year 2190, 50 years later, he is found by the Morphs and imprisoned in the lunar prison of New Alcatraz. There, he is rescued by a man who introduces himself as John O'Connor, who tells him that the Morphs beat him to Conrad's ship and leaves Conrad a few items of interest, a PDA and a handgun. Conrad soon makes it to John's ship. They blast off, Morphs start attacking them, and they teleport to the space. They meet this lady named Sarah Smith. Then it is a whole long process of events take place, and the game has 2 endings, and I actually think it's 3 endings. Yeah, it's a pretty crazy game. Check it out. Auto Destruct. You play as a retired race car driver hunting down a fanatical cult that was responsible for murdering your wife and daughter. This game is literally John Wick, but with cars. Deadball Zone. Deadball Zone from GT Interactive Software is a futuristic game of Kill the Ball Carrier, where you are the manager of an 8-man team. You take control of various psychopathic players as you go for the score at all costs. You get to use grenades, guns, and chainsaws to reach your opponent's goal with a small flaming ball. Eternal Eyes. Luke and his sister Elena are 2 orphans living in a small house in the kingdom of Gross. or Gross. It's probably Gross. They have two good friends, Mouse and Nicole. One day while exploring a local cave, the four youths find a mysterious jewel. Later they travel to the city of Goondocks where they find a similar jewel along with a note left to them by Luke's and Elena's parents. They learn that their parents belong to an ancient race named Eternal Eyes, people who could control inanimate dolls called the Mappets. Now the four heroes have to learn the power of controlling Mappets and to stop a villain from resurrecting the goddess of destruction. World's Scariest Police Chases. This game is based on the TV series known by the same name, World's Scariest Police Chases, as you may have guessed it. You play as law enforcement chasing down criminals in high-speed chases. It's reminiscent of the police mode in Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2. Tier 5. Floating Runner. The villainous Zower. What is this guy's name? Zower? The villainous Zower has usurped control of the floating lands, and at his behest, vile creatures have overrun the seven worlds, terrorizing the inhabitants, and generally, they're just running amok. As the bounty hunter Lei, or the young priestess Cress, players must venture across the lands en route to a final showdown with the evil force behind the chaos. Ubik. The game is based on the novel Ubik by Philip K. Dick. The player controls the main character from the book called Joe Chip. He is working for a company called Run-Sitter Associates in Los Angeles in the year 2019. And his job is to protect companies against industrial spying from other companies. With genetic engineering and the development of replicants, both sides have PSI powers at hand to reach their targets. Firo and Claude. In the depths of New York City live two animal cop characters living out their own dreams. Firo, an orange ape, and Claude, an alley cat. But when counterfeit crimes push the city to its limits, the two must knock their differences to the side and clean up the mess that the other cops yet to achieve. Sentinel Returns. This game is basically a PS1 spookified version of hide and seek, with animal characters. Aconcagua. In the fictional South American country of Maruza, a woman named Pachamama leads a revolutionary movement that fights against the oppression and cruelty of the installed dictatorship. The nation is currently going through a very bad time right now. Political regime and social unrest. Sounds like much of what is going on in the world right now. The game's main characters meet on an airplane, and while on this plane, all of a sudden a bomb is detonated, shattering the jet plane into pieces scattered over the frozen mountains of the Andes in Aconcagua. The Book of Watermarks. Prospero, the Duke of Milan, is deposed and exiled on a desert island. Prospero invites the player in the role of Ferdinand to solve a series of puzzles as they explore his estate to uncover 12 of Prospero's 13 magical books, within which are the source of his powers. Hermie Hopperhead. This is Hermie. One day Hermie witnesses an egg jump out of a trash can. He went to investigate like any normal person would do, and when he looked inside the trash can, he fell into a portal to an alternate dimension of walking eggs and flying garbage. Clayman Gun Hockey. It's pretty strange for an American designed game to get a spin-off specifically for the Japanese market, and yet here we are with Clayman Gun Hockey. Developed by a company called Kids Mind and published by Riverhill Soft, who also published the other Clayman games in Japan. It's pretty much just air hockey, except you shoot the puck with guns. On the playing field, there are several power-ups that can block your goals, unleash multiple pucks, or speed up the movement. The player with the highest score when the time limit runs out wins. And that's pretty much it. It's incredibly simplistic, especially since the gun aims towards the puck anyway, so it's not even that hard. Sentient. You are sent to investigate an outbreak of radiation sickness aboard the space station Icarus. But once aboard, you realize your primary objective is the least of your worries. The captain has been murdered, and an assassin threatens a visiting senior senator. and a power struggle arises as the station careens towards the sun. Save yourself or save the ship. You get to choose. Planet Laika. Planet Laika is a role-playing game where the player controls the titular character Laika, who is part of an expedition to Mars in order to discover the truth about rumors that have been going around concerning the end of the world and the existence of a certain supernatural creature. Laika has multiple personality disorder, and when talking to other characters, the player will see an aura around them in one of 3 colors, each of which is associated with a personality type. Yellow for those who wish to attain physical beauty, red for people who are strong and violent, and finally blue, who are psychotic but very crafty individuals. Dog Day. The game is a first-person point-and-click adventure where you play as a dog in a world where dogs are people. They are living under a corrupt regime caused by a dictator named Chega. You must find evidence of Chega's crimes and sell it to a group called CATS, Coalition Against Totalitarian Society, who will give him enough money to buy a train ticket to escape. It's such a strange yet comprehensible plot I've ever read about. It's confusing, but makes sense. Gadget passes future. You know about the movie Polar Express? Well, this game is similar to that movie in the sense that there's a big train in it. It's an adventure-based game, but it's a bit more like a movie rather than a game. UFO A Day in the Life. UFO A Day in the Life puts the player in the role of attempting to save a group of 50 fellow aliens who have been stranded on Earth after crashing into an apartment building. However, the aliens are invisible and the player is unable to actually see the alien they are trying to rescue. To this effect, the player must use a device called Cosmo Scanner, a kind of camera to reveal the creatures. Once a certain number of photographs have been taken, the player returns to the ship to develop the pictures. This is done by giving the negatives to a giant floating head called Mother. As more aliens are rescued, more areas open up and different times of day are available for exploration. Evo Space Adventures. This game is a port of a game called Space Station Silicon Valley that was on the Nintendo 64. But both versions of the game never featured a North American release and only came out in Europe. According to reviews of the game, the PS1 port is far from being considered a quality product, littered with glitches and bugs, which ironically sounds like a lot of the new games you've been getting over the years, so nothing must have changed. Paranoia Escape. Without any context, this is probably the most disturbing game on this list. Even though it may not seem like it at first glance, Paranoia Escape is a pinball game with a nightmare level set all the way to 100. There are demonic red eyes that watch you as you play through the level, mouths that are trying to bite you, and the occasional smile guy. Now there are 2 questions that should be going through your head right now. Who made this game? And if this game was allowed to be released in North America, then what did Evo Space Adventure have that prevented it from being released in North America? The game was developed by a man named Screaming Mad George. George is actually a VFX artist that helped design the masks worn by Slipknot. And if you're aware of the band of Slipknot, you'd already know that these guys wear some pretty scary masks. So that kinda explains the whole atmosphere of the game. The Silver Case. The Silver Case takes place in a rendition of Japan in the year 1999, in a city referred to as the 24 Districts. There have been a series of bizarre murders happening throughout the city, prompting the 24 Districts Police Department to send 2 detectives from their heinous crimes unit to solve the case. The killings are soon linked to Kamui Urahara, a notorious serial killer who supposedly died several years before. The gameplay is in the style of a visual novel, kinda like the Persona series, but much less free roam and more reading. A better analogy would be Doki Doki Literature Club or the Fate series games. However, there are segments of the game where you can move around freely, but most of the game revolves around text-based situations and point-and-click mechanics, rhythm, and face. If you watch the first video going over the first 3 tiers of this Iceberg chart, which I highly recommend if you haven't, then you may remember a man named Osamu Sato that I had mentioned in one of the entries. Sato is the guy that created the LSD Dream Emulator game. Well, if you didn't know, he actually created 2 more games after that. one that I can't pronounce the entire title of the game, so I'll just call it Tokyo for short, and the game we're going over now, Rhythm and Face. Similar to the other games he created, Rhythm and Face has the same art style with weird creatures and trippy colors. Instead of wandering around a dreamscape, this game is more like a puzzle game. There is a canvas in the middle of the screen and two dancing creatures to the left and right side of it. The goal of the game is to rearrange the squares on the canvas to make the face of a creature that pops up at the beginning of the level. The creatures dancing on the side of the canvas actually show you the direction you should be arranging the squares. I think this is a pretty cool game concept, and would have liked to see something like this released on a handheld device, or even a port or re-release on the PSP. Personally, I don't think this is a game I would like to play on a screen while sitting down, unless it was a party game you can play with friends, kinda like Puyo Puyo Tetris or Mario Party. Planet Dob. The game begins with a man named Dob-kun, who is a cosmic policeman that is currently flying through outer space. He eventually comes across a sign that he decides to follow, but he was unaware that this sign was actually part of a plan by an evil scientist named Dr. X, who is trying to trap Dob and perform experiments on him. After Dob-kun falls for the trap and is captured by one of the scientists working alongside Dr. X, they use a device called the Mind Light and is injected into Dob's consciousness. Eventually, Dob obtains a special suit that allows him to enter his own consciousness and venture through a city that dwells inside of his head. In this city, there is a CPU that controls everything and keeps the city maintained. However, this CPU is malfunctioning, so now Dob must collect these things called 144 bits that are running around the city and return them to the CPU. Tier 6. Silent Chaos. Silent Chaos is a cancelled action-adventure game that was in development by Callisto Entertainment from 1997 to 1999. The game was going to be published on the PlayStation by Squaresoft, but originally the project started as a sequel of Dark Earth, an action-adventure created by the same team and released only on PC. After a few months of work on Dark Earth 2, Callisto stopped the development for the PC, but it seemed that Squaresoft was interested in the game and they changed Dark Earth 2 into a new IP for the original PlayStation. The character designs that were initially created at Callisto were redone again by Tetsuya Nomura, one of the main character designers at Squaresoft, famous for his works on Final Fantasy VII, Parasite Eve, The Bouncer, and many more. Sadly, after a couple years of development, Silent Chaos was cancelled, probably because of the shift of development on the soon-to-be-released PlayStation 2. A new Dark Earth 2 project was later proposed for the PlayStation 2, but nothing came from it. Callisto Entertainment declared bankruptcy in 2002, and Dark Earth 2 and Silent Chaos vanished forever with the studio and only a few CG models and backgrounds remain. Silent Chaos vanished forever with the studio, and only a few files remain to ever give a tale of its existence. Monster Force. Monster Force was a third-person hack-and-slash with kid versions of famous monsters like vampires, zombies, werewolves, and that jack-o'-lantern guy from Billy and Mandy. The game was originally planned to be in development for the original PlayStation at Universal/Vivendi Interactive in 2001. However, the project was later dropped, but a version of Monster Force for the Game Boy Advance was released in 2002. Race and Chase. This game is actually the prototype or beta version to the first entry in the Grand Theft Auto series. Because it was a prototype, there was never a publicly playable version of the game, so there's no official gameplay that exists of it. However, there is the screenshot that I found on Reddit that was said to be a leak from one of the original developers. Based on the image, we can conclude that the gameplay is identical to the first two Grand Theft Auto games. However, there might have been more focus on racing around the city and getting points as you do so, rather than driving around the city stealing cars and committing atrocities. I do remember hearing that GTA originally was supposed to be a racing game, and coming across this proves what I heard was true. Gex Jr. Another prototype of a game that was never released, Gex Jr. was a cancelled follow-up to Gex 3, a mascot platformer similar to Jak and Daxter and Banjo-Kazooie. All that remains of the game is a short level that repeats itself after you beat it. Helcatraz. Helcatraz is an adventure game that was supposed to come out but was cancelled early in development. All that exists of the game are a few screenshots of character models and concept arts. Aeon Flux. Aeon Flux is an action-adventure game featuring a female protagonist that was supposed to release all the way back in 1996, but it was cancelled and never finished. There was someone that made a comment that claimed to remember seeing a trailer for the game at E3, but I wasn't able to find anything online. There is a playable prototype of the game that is playable, like I said, it's playable, and it has 7 missions. It makes me wonder why they stopped developing the game when they had made a pretty significant amount of progress. My first guess would be lack of funding, but who am I to know? Rattlesnake Red. Set to make a release for the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation 1, Rattlesnake Red was going to be an action-adventure game until it was cancelled and wiped from existence. There is very little information I was able to gather on this game other than one screenshot and that the game was heavily inspired by Looney Tunes, but according to the lead animator, the game was cancelled because of its poor quality and straying away and missing the original concept completely. Galleon. This is an Xbox game and doesn't belong on this list, so we're just going to act like this was never here and skip right over it. The Killing Tool. A cyberpunk-style platformer that was in the process of being developed by the studio Dynabyte Software in the year 1996, but the game was cancelled and the concept art is all that remains. Deuce. From what I've read, this would have been a pretty cool game to play. So it's a card game, but not really a card game. So you play as the Two of Hearts card, and your goal is to make your way to the Royal Flush family, as they are currently being conspired against by the Jack of Spades. According to the people that played the prototype of the game, and these few screenshots, the game was very similar to a Zelda dungeon crawler. There were items and keys that could be found to help navigate through the levels, and as a blackjack dealer, I'm disappointed that this game was never released. I definitely could see myself enjoying it. Beneath. This cancelled game actually has a pretty sad ending. So the game was being published by Activision, and developed by a studio called Presto Studios. The game was marketed to be the killer of the Tomb Raider series, and was supposed to be the superior dungeon crawling platformer in both gameplay and protagonist. The game was supposed to feature 12 different levels across 3 different civilizations. However, Presto Studios couldn't keep up with creating their ambitious game, and the game was cancelled in 2002 and the studio shut down. Moon 2. Do you remember the earlier entry, UFO Day in the Life? This game was what UFO Day in the Life was being developed as before it was called UFO Day in the Life. Arrow the Acrobat 2. This game may or may not have had a PS1 port, since I can only find Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and Game Boy Advance versions of the game, so this one gets to know why soccer is my favorite sport. Bioswarm. Also known by the name Battlesport 2, Bioswarm was a cancelled sci-fi vehicle combat game that was in the process of being developed by Cyclone Studios and was supposed to be a sequel to their first game, Battlesport. Witchwood. A Zelda-inspired adventure game that was being developed by Team 17 in 1994, but was cancelled possibly for lack of funding. There are screenshots of locations that would have been explorable in the game. By the looks of it, it looks a lot like an RPG Maker game, but it's not. It just has that type of style to it. Pac-Man Ghost Zone. This game is technically the predecessor or beta version of the Pac-Man World games over on the Nintendo GameCube and the PS2. Pac-Man Ghost Zone was cancelled during development, but the first game in the Pac-Man World series, Pac-Man World 1, was released 2 years after Ghost Zone's development. The Incredible Shrinking Character. Another cancelled action-adventure game that was supposed to release in 1996. There is a playable demo that starts off on level 8 and gives players a taste of what the game would have been like. Exodus. I can't find a whole lot of information on this game, but I did find gameplay and I watched it to get some sort of idea what the game was supposed to be. It looked to be as a cybernetic sci-fi shooter similar to the style of Doom, but in third person. But the creatures are kind of weird. There's weird entities that kind of remind me of Doom, so that's why I said Doom. But for whatever reason, the game was never released to the public. So they finished it, but they never released it. I wonder why. And that's it. We have reached the end of the Obscure PS1 games Iceberg. Let me know what you guys think. Have you played any of these games prior to watching this Iceberg video? Have you played any of these games because of the Iceberg videos? I would like to know. Maybe I might try some of these games myself because, I don't want to say and promote any sort of illegal activities, but we all know how we can play these games if we really want to. I'm not going to say how, but we all know. Nonetheless, I hope you all enjoyed the PS1 Obscure Games Iceberg, and I will see you in the next Iceberg video. Peace out.